The New York Rangers have clinched a spot in the Stanley Cup Playoffs, and with that being the case, we're going to discuss what we would like to see from the New York Rangers between now and the start of the postseason, including a more assertive Patrick Kane, a big win against the Devils this coming Thursday night, and much, much more. Plus, we also discuss the Rangers being back in action tonight, Tuesday night, against the Columbus Blue Jackets. All that and much more on today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers. Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 794 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And just for some clarification at the start of the episode, this isn't a ranking or anything like that. You know, we do rankings every now and then on this podcast. That's always a lot of fun, but there's just a really casual, really informal list, once again, of things that I would like to see from the New York Rangers between now and the time that the playoffs start. And we're going to begin, though, with what I do think is the most important thing on this list, and that is, as I just mentioned a second ago, a more assertive Patrick Kane. We've talked about Patrick Kane on and off pretty much ever since he came to the New York Rangers. Obviously, a really exciting time. One of those things that you didn't really think was going to happen, especially after the Rangers had already traded for Vladimir Tarasenko, but, you know, a couple of salary cap manipulation kind of moves and transactions later, and the next thing you know, Patrick Kane is a New York Ranger, pretty much for pennies on the dollar, but he's here now. And look, with Patrick Kane, the numbers are not bad since he came to the New York Rangers. He's got 4 goals and 4 assists. He's also a +1 in his first 12 games, and when you play your entire career with one team and you go to a different team, I think, you know, from a points perspective, you would probably take that type of a start, 8 points in 12 games. But right now, at least to me, maybe to some of you as well, Kane does not look like someone who is out there looking to take over the game, capable of taking over the game, whatever you want to call it. You know, all his career in Chicago with the Blackhawks, very, very assertive player, never lacking in confidence, and one of those guys that, you know, could dominate any certain game, could throw the entire team on his back in any certain game. We have not really seen that version of Patrick Kane, or at least not a lot of him, since he's come to the New York Rangers, but I still think it lies in there somewhere. I still think he has it within him to do that. And one of the biggest issues for me right now, and probably for you guys as well, is that I just don't think Kane is shooting the puck often enough. And beyond that, it's that he's passing on some really high-quality shots from some really high-danger areas on the ice. We've seen that pretty much ever since he got here. And look, I know Patrick Kane is a great passer. You could make the argument that that's his best asset in his career, 779 assists versus 446 goals. But my point stands. I still think he's got to shoot more. So far with the Rangers, 12 games, he's got 33 shots on goal, which is not a small amount, but I still think it could be higher because, once again, there have been multiple instances since he's gotten here where he's got a great chance to score, to shoot the puck, high danger opportunity, and he passes instead. And a great example of that was actually all the way back in his first game with the Rangers. He's debuting in Madison Square Garden. Rangers are home against the Senators. Rangers are on the power play. Panarin made a great cross-ice pass to Kane, and you could feel the Garden crowd. They knew who had the puck. They knew what they were watching here. Everybody was excited to see Patrick Kane in action in his debut for the New York Rangers, and here he is. He gets a great pass from his buddy Artemi Panarin there, and they're going to pick up right where they left off in Chicago, and the crowd was slowly kind of coming to a boiling point and anticipating that shot from Patrick Kane, and they didn't get it. He tried to force a pass, and that didn't work. It's just one example, but we've seen other instances of this happening, really, once again, ever since he's gotten to the New York Rangers. One other idea here, though, that I want to throw out, and something that could be construed as defensive Patrick Kane, which I suppose it is, it's also possible that Patrick Kane right now is saving a little bit of energy for the Stanley Cup playoffs. He's not an ancient player in this league, but he is 34 years old. I don't want to rule out the possibility that Kane is very well aware of where the Rangers are in the standings, what the situation is, the fact that this team is going to be going to the playoffs, and once again, that is now official thanks to a couple of results from Monday's slate of games. But, Patrick Kane, he's been in this league for a long time. He's played over 1,000 regular season games, over 100 Stanley Cup playoff games. So, he's got a lot of wear and tear, and obviously the Stanley Cup playoffs, they're a grind. It's a marathon. There's no such thing as an easy series win. He knows what it takes, and it's at least possible that he's not fully stepping on the gas right now, not going completely, 110% or whatever you want to call it, because he knows where he's at in his career, being 34 years old. And again, it's not like he's past the point of no return as far as being a really productive player in this league at the age of just 34, but it's possible that, he feels like he knows himself and, he feels like he's got to save some energy and be ready to go and have a full tank of gas, so to speak, when the Stanley Cup playoffs roll around. So I will say that in defense of Patrick Kane, but I think that's the most important thing that the Rangers need, once again, between now and the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs. I'd like to see this last handful of games here where Kane, really kind of asserts himself and just looks like that player, that guy that's done all those great things with the Chicago Blackhawks and obviously at the forefront of it all, a 3-time Stanley Cup champion. We're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. We're going to talk a little bit about something we'd like to see from Igor Shesterkin. There's also power play debate to be had here because the power play has been struggling a little bit recently. And also going to talk about why a road win against the Devils on Thursday would be huge and why I think that's the biggest game remaining for the Rangers, at least in the regular season. And we're going to do all that good stuff in just a second. But first, got to let everybody know, today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The tournament is heating up, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net. All on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. And we just want to go ahead and thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. All right, so Igor Shesterkin, just in general, obviously we want to see him keep playing the way that he's been playing recently. I would say the past, handful of weeks, however far you want to go back here, it's the best that we've seen Igor Shesterkin play all season. He's found that consistency that at times is a little bit lacking this season, and I've talked about this before in the past. I don't want to always hold Igor to the standard of what he did last year. It was a historic season, and the type of season that is very, very rare for an NHL goalie to have. When you look at the numbers that he posts and just how good he really was. But one thing I want to see very specific from Igor Shesterkin down the stretch here, I want to see Igor Shesterkin in this last handful of games here get a shutout. Because a couple of reasons. For starters, once again, let's emphasize the fact that Igor Shesterkin is having a very good season. It's not quite as good as last year, but very few seasons are by any goalie in the history of this sport. So Igor this year, 33-12-7 record, 914 save percentage, a 255 goals against average. A lot of goalies would do just about anything to have numbers like that. Igor, though, this season has only 2 shutouts. That's a little bit low for him. Certainly by his standards, he had 6 last year. And I think getting a shutout, say in like the last game that he starts of the regular season or the second to last game, somewhere down the stretch there, regardless of who the opponent might be, getting a shutout down the stretch here, right before the playoffs start, that's going to be a big-time confidence booster and just kind of a big-time, here we go kind of a moment for the New York Rangers. Not to the point where all of his teammates fall into that trap of over-relying on Igor Shesterkin, but hopefully it's just kind of that moment where everybody just kind of comes together and it's like, yeah, man, we're going to do this. We're going to go into the Stanley Cup playoffs. We got Igor playing his best. He's our backbone. He's got our back. I want the Rangers to have that kind of a feeling going into the playoffs, and I think if Igor finds a way to pitch a shutout down the stretch here, one of these last couple of games remaining, that would certainly bode well for the New York Rangers heading into the playoffs, for Igor himself and really the entire team as a whole. Something else that I want to see the Rangers do, and it's something that's kind of been an ongoing topic on this podcast and really across New York Ranger fandom, I want to see them settle on their line combinations. Let's know what the bleep we're doing once the playoffs start here. And I say that with nothing but affection for this Ranger team. But at a certain point, you got to have these lines come together. You got to say, okay, these are the combinations we're going with. These are the guys that are going to be in the lineup. I think they at least know at this point, the 20 players that are going to be dressed, assuming everybody is healthy. But let's get to a point where we feel good about our lineup, we feel good about our line combinations, and we're not going to make any changes unless we feel like we have no choice. There could be a spot in the playoffs where the well runs dry a little bit, and you feel like you have to shuffle the deck, and at that point, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But let's not plan for failure here. Let's go into the playoffs thinking that, okay, these are our line combinations. This is what we're rolling with. We have all this depth. We have all these great players. We're coming right at you. We're going to get in your face with these line combinations. That's just how it's going to be. We're going to dictate terms because we feel really good about these three players playing together and these three players together, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the good news for my fellow Ranger fans who have kind of been hoping that the Rangers would do this, that they would eventually settle on a lineup, as far as line combinations are concerned, the good news is that it seems like we're getting pretty close. Right now, I think the top line, you got to be looking at Panarin, Mika, and Tarasenko. That trio has been electric, except for maybe in this last game when the kid line pretty much kind of carried the Rangers to that win. But they've been great together. I think... you'd be crazy to break up the kid line right now. They're technically the third line, but you saw the game that they just had. Kakko, Hedl, and Lafreniere, all three of them had 1 goal and 1 assist in the Rangers' most recent game. And, of course, the Rangers needed every single one of those goals. The fourth line, Mott, Goodrow, and Vesey, those seem like fourth-line players. Certainly Goodrow and Vesey, maybe even Mott could play a top 9 role if they're needed to, but they're not needed to with all the depth that the Rangers have and all the additions that they made, namely Tarasenko and Kane at the trade deadline. So that's a fourth line, and I think it's about as good as any fourth line in the game. And the only line I haven't really talked about yet, the second line, Kreider, Trocheck, and Kane. Kreider and Trocheck, I feel like they've slowly developed more and more chemistry as the season has gone by here, so that's a solid combo for the Rangers. And, of course, Patrick Kane, we already talked about him. We need him to pick it up a little bit and get back to being that guy, that dude. But, yeah, overall, I think, we're heading in the right direction as far as finally solidifying the line combinations is concerned. And to kind of just build on that, little caveat for that whole thing is it's not just, the even strength line combinations. We got to figure out what we're doing on the power play as well, because the power play all of a sudden is back in a rut. If I could take you guys back to the last 8 Ranger games that have been played, I'm going to start with the most recent game and go in order to the least recent game. The last 8 Ranger games to see how the Rangers have fared on the power play in those 8 games. So the most recent game, they were 0 for 3. Game before that, 0 for 3. Game before that, 0 for 3. Game before that, they were 1 for 4. The game before that, they were also 1 for 4. Game before that, 0 for 2. The game before that, they were 1 for 2. And the game before that, they were 0 for 2. That all adds up to 3 for their last 23 in the last 8 games, and that's just not good enough. You guys know. You don't need me to run through the gauntlet here and tell you all the players on the Rangers that are capable of, producing points at a high clip. You guys watch this team, you know who's here. 3 for 23 with that group of players. That's just not good enough, and it should be better. I realize all power plays go through scoring ruts from time to time, but this should be a strength of this Ranger team. And I'm okay. Unlike the even strength line combinations, I'm okay if the Rangers want to keep experimenting a little bit with the power play, because right now, like I said, it is in a little bit of a rut, so you got to find the right combination. Recently, what they've been doing, top power play unit has been Panarin, Mika, Fox, Kane, and Kreider. And then the second unit, Hedl, Lafreniere, Trouba, Tarasenko, Trocheck. And if I do anything, if I make any adjustments there, what I might do is actually flip-flop Tarasenko and Kane. I might put Kane onto the top unit, put Trocheck. Let's try it again. Put Tarasenko onto the top unit. There we go. Tarasenko onto the top unit, Patrick Kane down to the second unit. The reason for this is when you look at the top unit right now as it's currently constructed, the only guy that's really a sniper is Mika Zibanejad. I know Kreider, he'll get a lot of goals and everything, and he's had a really nice season. He broke the 30-goal plateau not that long ago. But with Kreider, it's not so much, booming slap shots and that kind of stuff. He's there in the crease. He's the net front presence. He's looking for those tipping goals or to, clean up some loose change in the crease there. So I want another, pure shooter on the top line, and I think Tarasenko qualifies for that, especially with Kane right now, being a little bit hesitant to shoot and being a little bit pass happy. Let's put Tarasenko on the top unit, and now you've got Mika, who can boom those slap shots. You've got Tarasenko with the great wrist shot. That gives you some options. Kreider can tip it in from the net. Panarin can always score. You got Adam Fox quarterbacking everything out there. That should be like the best power play unit in the NHL, or at least certainly right up there, the Mount Rushmore of NHL power play units right now. And then the second unit, I mean, I guess, it's a little bit, uneven. The top unit seems to have most of the Rangers, true bona fide star players. But then you're looking at a second unit of, Kane with Hedl, Lafreniere, Trouba, and Trocheck. And I'm kind of hoping that what could happen there is with Kane moving down to the second unit and away from Panarin and away from Mika and away from Kreider, all these long-standing New York Rangers star players, maybe Kane begins to assert himself a little bit more on that second power play because he's going to be out there with the kids, Hedl and Lafreniere. I mean, Trouba's a veteran, so too is Tarasenko, but, Kane working out there with Hedl and Lafreniere, that could be a lot of fun. Maybe Kane, in a group like that, kind of sees himself as, okay, I'm the guy on this power play unit. I'm going to help these kids, and, let's see what happens. But I think that's the one move I would make, at least for the time being. Flip-flop, Tarasenko and Kane. Tarasenko goes to the top power play unit. Kane drops down to the second power play unit. Something else that I would really like to see before the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs here is a healthy Ryan Lindgren, and this one's pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, he's a huge part of this team. His game plays very well in the playoffs. He was great in the postseason last year. They really missed him when he missed that handful of games against the Pittsburgh Penguins. They need Ryan Lindgren back in the lineup. They've said he's day-to-day. It's such a vague term. I mean, who knows what that really means. But, my thing, and we've talked about this before too, don't rush him back to try to improve your playoff seeding, and I don't think the Rangers would do that. But in a perfect world, in a perfect world, he's completely healthy and he can play in tonight's game against Columbus. But if nothing else, I'm just hoping that he's healthy enough to go when there's at least, 3 games left in the regular season. Let's get him back out there. Maybe you limit his ice time in those games if the injury is still lingering at all. But you get him back out there for a few more regular season games down the stretch, and then, you put him in for the playoffs, and by then he's ready to go. The last few regular season games can kind of, be his buffer into the postseason, so to speak. If he can't make it back until the playoffs, then so be it. Day to day, sounds like he should be back before the playoffs start, but in a perfect world, like I said, let's at least get him back for the last 3 regular season games and use that as a little bit of a tune-up for the postseason. We're going to keep everything rolling in just a second here. We're going to continue to talk about why I really want to see the Rangers get a win against the Devils and why that's the biggest game remaining for the Rangers in the regular season. Also, I got to talk about the kid line a little bit and quick look at the matchup against the Columbus Blue Jackets tonight, and we're going to do all that good stuff in just a second. All right, let's keep everything rolling here. So, I mentioned the Devils game on Thursday just a second ago. If I had the ability to, just pick any of the remaining games on the Rangers schedule, and how many are left here? So we got 6 in April, and then in March, there are 3 games left. So we got 9 games left, including the game against the Blue Jackets later tonight. If I could pick one of these games for me to just push a button and the Rangers automatically win the game, I would take this game against the New Jersey Devils for a couple of reasons. For starters, it just feels like the Rangers and Devils are on a collision course to meet in probably the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's a feeling that I had all year last year with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and of course, that's your 2-3 matchup, the Rangers the 2 seed in the Metro and the Penguins the 3 seed, and it just has kind of felt that way this year. These two teams have kind of walked similar paths. They both were kind of down and out for a while. They both have rebuilt very effectively. Obviously, the Rangers got there one season quicker than the Devils, but they're both, looking like contenders again. And even when both these teams were, for lack of a better term, bad, and obviously still going through the rebuild, every game they played against each other still had kind of that big fight feel to it, and, a lot of intensity. There was always something crazy happening, a team rallying out of a deficit to come back and win, a goal being scored with less than a minute left in regulation, craziness in overtime. There was a 7-round shootout a year or 2 ago when Kreider beat the Devils in the 7th round of the shootout. So it's just been crazy, and it just feels like, that's the way it's going to be. That feeling is just kind of in the air, and if you look at the standings right now, it's probably more likely now than it has been all season that they're going to end up meeting each other. Of course, it's always possible. The Devils pass the Hurricanes. The Rangers pass the Hurricanes. They both pass the Hurricanes, and then they don't meet in the first round. And, that's all well and good if that happens, and the Rangers will play whoever they play. But like I've been saying, it it just feels like they're on a collision course. And this game, winning this game, if you do win this game, you then split the season series with the Devils, and, you're ready to go. You kind of send a message to them before the playoffs begin here that, we're ready to take you on, and we get kind of the last word before we play the Devils in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The other reason, this is a little bit more of a tangible reason why it's the biggest game of the remainder of the regular season, and why I feel like the Rangers, that this is a big game for them to win, and why it's kind of on my wish list here as far as things I'd like to see from the Rangers before the regular season ends. It's got playoff implications. So for a quick standings update here, the Devils are now second in the Metro Division. They have 100 points in 74 games. The Rangers have 96 points in 73 games. So the Rangers have a game in hand on the Devils as it stands right now, and if they win that game, the game in hand, and they also beat the Devils in regulation on Thursday, then you've got a situation where the Rangers and Devils will be tied for second place in the Metro Division coming down the home stretch here. And recently, the Rangers have been playing better than the Devils. The Rangers are rolling. Devils have just 4 wins in their last 10 games, so they've stumbled just a little bit, and that's another reason right there. I mean, you can maybe deal them a blow late in the regular season, and maybe a little bit of doubt creeps in for the Devils. I mean, I don't know if that would happen or not. They seem like they have a strong locker room just like the Rangers do, but you got a lot of players on that team who, will be going to the Stanley Cup playoffs for the first time, so maybe you deal them just a little bit of doubt, especially if you win big, on Thursday. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. One thing I want to say is a quick aside here, or a quick PS, if you will. We as fans have the luxury of looking ahead to Thursday's game against the Devils. The Rangers themselves had better not do that, because they are at home tonight against the Columbus Blue Jackets, and every point counts right now as far as, trying to climb the standings. So don't fall into the trap, basically, of overlooking the Blue Jackets because you're looking ahead to play the Devils. And I don't think the Rangers would do that. It's not that kind of team. But we did see the Blue Jackets already beat the Rangers once in Madison Square Garden earlier this season. So let's certainly not have that happen again. Something else I want to see down the stretch here, I want to see Madison Square Garden get into playoff mode. You got 4 home games left tonight against the Jackets, on the 5th of April against the Lightning, on the 10th of April against the Sabres, and then the regular season finale on the 13th of April against the Toronto Maple Leafs. MSG, you gotta bring it. Anybody going to these games, you gotta bring it. We gotta start already cultivating that electricity, that playoff-like atmosphere. I think, for sure the game against the Lightning, people should be up for that. That was the Eastern Conference final matchup last season. And I think even the regular season finale against the Leafs, I wouldn't say the Rangers and Leafs are like this crazy rivalry, but they're 2 high-profile teams. And, obviously I think the fans at that point should just be excited, because it's that, and then right after that, you go into the playoffs. So let's see Madison Square Garden get it rocking here down the home stretch. Something else I want to see, let's go with a little bit more ice time for the kid line. For starters, that line went off in the last game. They earned it. They were clearly the Rangers' best line on the ice. Even if you take all the goals off the table, they played better than anybody else. So I say ride that wave of momentum and see if you can't get these kids, firing on all cylinders before the playoffs start. Because I've said this many times, but once that kid line, once those 3 kids take that next step and go to that next level, that's when the Rangers are a legitimately scary team, and a team that could very well end up winning the Stanley Cup. And another reason for that is obviously the kid line. By the very nature of the nickname, that it's a very young trio of players. So, if there's some Ranger veterans that are a little bit banged up, or you just want to, kind of lighten the workload a little bit down the stretch. I mean, you can't take your foot off the gas too much, but I see no issue with, Patrick Kane not playing as many minutes down the stretch here. I see no issue with, Tarasenko or Panarin or really anybody else. If their time on the ice gets scaled back a little bit in favor of getting the kids some more time, the kids can handle it. They're all young. You're veteran players. You want to make sure they're rested and ready to go for the Stanley Cup playoffs. Another thing that I want to mention here, this really doesn't have anything to do with the Rangers, but I'd just like to see the Penguins miss the playoffs, because enough of this already. This streak has to end. The Penguins right now have 82 points. They are in position to be the second wildcard team. They only have 4 wins in their last 10 games, but every team chasing them in the standings is basically falling apart right now. The Panthers have 4 straight regulation losses. They're right behind the Penguins. The Sabres, Senators, and Capitals, all 3 of those teams have only 3 wins in their last 10 games. So the Penguins very well might be on the outside looking in if any of these teams behind them were playing decent hockey right now. But alas, that's not the case. Penguins will probably find a way to sneak in there, because that's just what they do. They're that cockroach that just won't die. But anyway, quick look at the Rangers game against the Blue Jackets, which will be happening later tonight, Tuesday night. As I mentioned a second ago, the Jackets are not a good team. They've been in the cellar of the Eastern Conference for pretty much the entire season, 23, 42, and 7. As I mentioned, though, they did beat the Rangers once at Madison Square Garden earlier this season. So the Rangers, they're playing too well to lose, to have some kind of a letdown or anything against this Columbus Blue Jackets team. I mean, you guys have seen what they've done recently. They beat the Penguins twice, completely crushed them in the second of those two meetings, completely crushed the Nashville Predators. They did lose to the Hurricanes, but since then, 2 come-from-behind wins against the Carolina Hurricanes and Florida Panthers, both on the road. I don't want to say ruin it, because it won't take away, like, all the good things that they've done in those games, but don't, like, diminish it by turning around and, like, losing 4-1 inexplicably at home against the Blue Jackets. Go out, get the job done, and, beat a team that you obviously should beat. As of this recording, when I hit record a short time ago here, no starting goalies announced for either team, but Halak played in the most recent game for the Rangers. I would have to believe it'll be back to Igor Shesterkin, especially when you consider that there is an upcoming back-to-back for the Rangers on Thursday and Friday, respectively. The Rangers will be at the Devils and at the Buffalo Sabres. So you got to figure Halak will play one of those games. The only way Halak would play in this game tonight is if the Rangers are going with the strategy of really, really limiting Igor's workload down the stretch, but I don't think that'll happen. I think we'll see Igor tonight probably more often than not, but we shall see. Nothing official as of yet. That will pretty much do it for today, though, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. And definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, at @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that is at @LO_NY_Rangers. And absolutely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time. Thanks for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.